So, Heat is pretty much a stone-cold modern-day crime classic, and I thought we might discuss it today. So what is a retro review? Well, this is where I review a movie I've already seen. I'll rewatch it for the review, so a little different from my normal movie reviews, which are my first impressions of a film. And rewatching films isn't something I often do, what with a lack of time, and also there being so many films out there to watch. I've done a few of these. I've done one for Copland, Hoffa with Jack Nicholson, and for the Godfather films, and do plan to do a lot more. So Heat is a film which I always consider part of the gangster movie family, a collection of crime films from the 70s to 90s where you often see names like Pacino, Scorsese, De Niro, De Palma, Coppola, Pesci. We all know what kind of movies I'm talking about: The Godfather, Goodfellas, Casino, Scarface, Donnie Brasco, The Untouchables, Carlito's Way, and so on and so forth. Heat doesn't quite fit when you think about it. It's different because it isn't really a gangster film. It's a cops and robbers movie, the cops and robbers movie, but it's still often talked about in the same breath as those films, and I guess that's largely because the movie stars Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. I watched most of the great gangster movies for the first time in the space of about a month. I was binge watching them after having discovered the genre, and some films really stuck out and others didn't. Heat was one of those that tickled my fancy, partly because it was so action heavy than many of the other films, and as a kid or a teenager, I don't really remember which, but it's something you always think of as cool, and that's the perfect word to describe Heat. It's cool. Everything about it is cool. The characters, the way they move, walk and talk, the shots, the action, the entire underworld these guys operate in. The average Joe completely oblivious, everything. And LA, with its skyline and shooting on location, is a character itself. Heat was my first Michael Mann film, and is probably neck and neck with The Insider for being my favourite. So I watched the film again recently, mainly to prepare for the Heat 2 book Michael Mann released, which serves as a prequel and sequel. I wanted to have the movie fresh in my mind, and there are references in the film which I imagine will be relevant in the book, like De Niro's character mentioning he has a brother out there somewhere, and the accolades of Pacino's character being mentioned, taking down some heavy crews in the past. I also watched it with Vincent Hanna being on coke in my mind, as mentioned in a previous video. Pacino's character was chipping cocaine, but this detail was left out of the final film, and it does make a difference when you look at his performance, knowing he was on drugs. Watching the movie after having seen Michael Mann's films of the 80s like Thief and Manhunter, Heat retains the grittiness of those films, the street feel, but Mann's style feels more polished here. It feels like an update for the 1990s, like it did with the following decade when Mann updated his style again when he started using these HD digital cameras, although that was nowhere near as effective as his 1990s style. But more on that in an upcoming retro review of Public Enemies. I'm sure if you're watching this video I don't need to remind you of the plot, but the film of course follows both Pacino's Vincent and De Niro's Neil. Pacino as the cop fixated on hunting his targets, and De Niro as a master criminal who is efficient, intelligent, disciplined and determined not to go back to prison. We follow them separately until their stories clash directly with the coffee shop meeting and then of course the famous bank robbery shootout. Heat could have just left it at that. A great macho cop movie, following the good guys and the bad guys simultaneously with some great action. But it chooses to go further. It brings in the women folk, the families of these men into the picture, how their family life affects their work and vice versa. Vincent's dedication to the game utterly destroys his family life, and it's Neil's dedication to it and his motto of not allowing himself to get attached to anything that he can't walk out on in 30 seconds flat, which is why he has no home life, not even furniture, until of course he meets Edie. The men in the film are all chasing some high-end goal, whether it's getting the bad guys or making a big score. It all comes down to the thrill though, like one character says, "For me, the action is the juice." The women, on the other hand, Edie, Pacino's wife, Chris's girl, they are looking for connections. They want to settle down with the men they love, but the men are unable to let go of their love for the chase until they are forced to let go of it through death. Vincent and Neil in particular are pursuing excellence in their respective crafts. On a metaphorical level, you could argue death is what guys like Cherito and Neil are actually chasing. In other words, being away from it all. Life, companionship, commitment. They enjoy these things, but there is something bigger out there for them. Vincent too. I mean, he will go on many more chases beyond Heat and might easily end up dead. Val Kilmer is an interesting one because for him, his love for his girl overrides everything else. The sun rises and sets with her, as he says. He puts the love first, and in fact is doing the bank heist because he's hard up. Yet he is able to walk away in 30 seconds, and it's interesting that he's the one who gets away in the end. There's a lot to be said about the men and their relationship with their women. Trejo is another one, a man who was threatened through his woman and lost the will to live when he found out she died. The scene where De Niro recruits the ex-con in the diner, there's a wistful, dreamy music being played. It's unusual. It's almost as if there's an invisible, inevitable force that's pulling these men towards the game, which at some point or another will kill them. Rewatching the movie, the opening heist in particular, it's not particularly fun. The violence is not entertaining, rather it is brutal. I mean, we see 3 innocent men gunned down in cold blood mercilessly. The third guy in particular is hard to watch. He's disorientated, waddling around after his partners are shot. He looks like a child. And his killer walks right up to him, takes aim and floors him with 2 shots in the same frame. The sound design in this film, by the way, is incredible. We all know about them using real guns for the bank robbery shootout, but even small things like, the growl of an engine. One interesting thing that sticks out is that almost every scene in the film has some kind of plot device, something relevant to something that happens later in the film. De Niro taking the ambulance in the first scene, Val Kilmer buying stuff in the second, and it doesn't feel like a movie that's telegraphing stuff to you. Though it is plot heavy, it feels organic, and the plot devices are tackled in a matter-of-facty kind of way. There's a feeling I get from the film where it's like the movie knows you're watching it because you came to see De Niro and Pacino face off, and it's like, nah, you gotta wait for that. We're gonna give it to you, but you're gonna wait. In the meantime, we'll give you little teasers here and there, like when Pacino and De Niro both stare at the camera during the crew's robbery where they walk. Then there's the part where Vincent asks other cops who Neil is when they're watching the guys at the restaurant, when Neil is given the lowdown on who Vincent is by Nate, and where Neil takes pictures of Vincent. All these little teasers, and the movie makes you glad you had to wait because it gives you so much more in the meantime. It immerses you into the characters' lives to an extent where you kind of forget the whole De Niro-Pacino thing. And then all of a sudden, Pacino is roaring down the highway, the music is blasting, and the shot goes to his prey, and it's Robert De Niro. Such a cool moment. And then of course the famous coffee shop scene that follows, where these 2 men discover they are quite similar. They are driven by similar things and understand where the other is coming from. And the actors are so good. If you want to know just how good, check out the coffee shop scene from LA Takedown, the Michael Mann directed film which Heat itself is a remake of. When compared, it comes off as a high school play.
You see me doing thrill-seeker liquor store holdups with a born-to-lose tattoo on my chest?
No.
Right. And I am never going back.
The coffee shop scene deserves its own analysis video, but it is really such a great scene, not just because of the subversion of expectation with how we thought De Niro and Pacino might meet, but what we're seeing here is 2 men, lonely and isolated, coming across someone who understands them. 2 men who in a different life, under different circumstances, could have been 2 old friends, hence them talking to each other as such in this scene. There were not too many takes done of this scene and no rehearsal, at De Niro's behest, who wanted it to feel spontaneous, as if they really were meeting for the first time. Arguably the greatest actor of all time versus arguably the greatest actor of all time, both showing off their acting chops. The De Niro-Pacino factor is a big reason why the film works, and the story template is a perfect vehicle for the duo, and they totally own their characters. I'm sure it could have worked, but having seen both in their roles, it now seems impossible to see the parts reversed, for De Niro to have been the cop and Pacino the robber. I just wish there was one proper shot of them in the same frame in the coffee shop scene, though I guess Mann may have felt it was too self-conscious. I do remember an urban myth coming about that Pacino and De Niro never even actually met on set of the film, that there were stand-ins because both were busy making other movies at that time, or even maybe because they both didn't like each other because of their rivalry, but of course those rumors are not true. I mean, you can even see from this image they are clearly both in the same frame. The movie has so many imitators, so many films inspired by it which try to do what it did, like The Town, and even Michael Mann's own film Public Enemies, which tried to hit many of the same beats but failed. When Pacino is on the hunt, on the chase, Like an animal, like the Rottweiler he is in the film, you feel you're in a different world, a different dimension. When he's investigating the prostitute's murder, like him, you forget that his wife is sitting in a restaurant waiting for him. Forget that classy lifestyle that is waiting for him, which he doesn't really feel at home with. I paid more attention to the music on my rewatch. Obviously, there are many great musical moments, but one thing I noticed was that the music often doesn't stop or change in between scenes, and thus it sets and controls the vibe. Like when the ex-con is talking to his girl, and it transitions to De Niro talking to his girl, the music doesn't change at all, and it gives much of the movie this kind of dreamy quality, which is definitely enhanced by the gorgeous nighttime shots of LA with the lights and everything. You notice a lot of details upon rewatches, when allowing your eyes to wander, like Pacino looking at his subordinates for their takes before making the call to let Neil and his crew go, and the fact that Vincent is so harsh on the CI towards the end of the film, almost as if he doesn't like them. I remember him calling one of the gangsters earlier who was ratting out on his rivals a rat motherfucker. It's as if he despises their very existence, that they are not playing the game the way it should be played. Pacino entering the room and not noticing the water coming out of the bathroom where his stepdaughter has tried to kill herself, not noticing because he's too distracted thinking about Neil, is great symbolism. But you also notice some things you'd probably rather not. There's a fair few questionable elements about the plot, a few convenient things occurring for the story to keep ticking along, like Wangro magically disappearing from the car park when he was right under Neil. The fact that of all the guys Wangro goes to work for, it just happens to be someone who already has a beef with Neil. And one particularly head-scratching scene where the cops let Chris go. I just don't get that part. I mean, he doesn't even look different. I can't see why they wouldn't have images of Chris and matched it with the man in the car, or taken him in for some questioning at the very least. Some questionable stuff. There are many standout scenes from this film that are just so great and still hold up. I mean, the shootout is absolutely relentless, as we know. It just starts and doesn't stop. The noise of the guns, Chris's one-take reload, the chaos, the intensity. Although, funnily enough, when you have the knowledge that they use real guns, you can kind of tell. Because if you look close, it doesn't look like a lot of the actors are in the same shot when someone with a real firearm is shooting. It looks like they're shooting at nothing sometimes. But this is a pedantic nitpick. I really like that moment where Pacino is with the other cops near the scrapyard and it clicks with him what's actually going on, that they've been made, and he starts to realize what he's dealing with. He feels his first pang of respect for how good his prey is. It's quite a powerful moment, as is the gut-wrenching scene where Charlene sends the signal to Chris and the music hits. He has to turn his back on his woman and kid. He makes the sacrifice. Charlene makes the sacrifice. I always wonder if she always intended to do this. She did run away with Hank Azario's character, so I'm guessing not. Perhaps it was seeing Chris get out of the car, getting out and smiling at her, a smile of genuine warmth and love, and she just couldn't bring herself to turn him in. Another great scene is where Pacino says goodbye to his wife at the hospital and skips down the stairs. Another great little moment. It's like a throwback to those old cowboy movies. The lone rider saying goodbye to his womanfolk, about to round up the posse, and the hunt is back on. It would be quite easy for a lot of the stuff in this film to be cheesy and corny, like when Edie gets out of the car not breaking her eye contact with Neil at the end of the film. But Mann and the actors sell it well and pull it off. So this video is getting quite long. I think I'll leave it there. What do you think of Heat? Let me know in the comments section below, and let me know what film you'd like to see get the retro review treatment next. Thanks for watching.